Hello. Is there anybody out there? I'm showing 0 people, but sometimes it's wrong. So if you're out there, let me know. Say hello in the chat if you are here. Now I see that there are a few people. What are you reading? How is your Saturday? What's going on? Jerome, Abigail are both here, apparently. Maria is here. I don't think I know you, Maria. Hello, welcome. What are you all reading at the moment? I am reading, I haven't got the dust jacket on, but I am reading The Spear Cuts Through Water. Speaking of The Spear Cuts Through Water, speaking of the spear, there's Evie with a spear tattooed on her arm. We love this book so much.
Indeed.
I even have a Spear Cuts Through Water background today.
I did see that, and that makes me so happy. You have no idea.
Figured it might.
This is the one book that I get so nervous. Like, I want people to love so much, and I want people to read. But then I'm like, oh god, are they gonna like it? And I just get like Mary Catherine Gallagher sweating. So I'm very happy that you're enjoying it.
I've never had anyone be this nervous about recommending a book to me before. But I'm close to the end, not super close to the end, but I guess I'm 3/4 of the way through roughly.
Which day are you at?
I just started the 5th day, I think. Okay. I mean, we already had some confusion. For people who haven't read it, its chapters are days in the story, except for the first chapter.
Yeah.
So the first chapter is called Before, and then it's the first day, second day, third day, fourth day. Oh, no. I just started the 4th day. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Where things start getting very strange, as if they weren't strange enough already. Hello, Trevor. Hello, Safina. Oh, that sounds nice, Abigail. Rainy day, cat on your lap, good books. That sounds extremely cozy.
It is not a rainy day, but I'm gonna force my cat on my lap. So there we go.
It was kind of sunny here today. The weather has slowly been changing lately. Like last weekend, Saturday was the first day that I could actually put on shorts.
Nice.
Which was quite an event. It's always quite an event for me. I prefer to always be barefoot in shorts, if possible. Jerome is reading The God Is Not Willing. That is awesome. I have not gotten to that yet. I have all of the Malazan books by Erickson and Esselmont on my shelf, but I've only read Malazan. Dan,
can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, it's all working this time, except you're very dark.
Yes, I know. I'm going to work on my lighting right now.
Yeah, so for those in the chat, I semi-spontaneously, only a couple of hours ago, decided to do Sprintz. And then I wrote a few booktuber friends and said, hey, if you want to join me on screen, here's a link. So I don't know who's coming, but maybe a few people. Yeah, Dan's always got a dog. I didn't realize the other dog. I think I've only ever seen the pug before.
Yeah, the other dog, his name is Jackson Brown.
Okay.
And that was my first dog that I was ever able to get because I grew up with my grandparents and they were not, they weren't getting animals, and I got out, did my whole 20s, 30s, college, others. And when I finally got my own place, I wanted animals, and I got Jackson. from some farm, and then we decided. My kid really wanted a pug, so we got Iggy Smalls as well.
Iggy Smalls?
Yeah, Iggy, Iggy Smalls. Except for he eats everything, so he is called Piggy Smalls now. And he was going to be Iggy Pop, so I was looking for musical things. And if I did name him Iggy Pop, he would have been renamed Iggy Poops, because he poops all over my damn house and he hasn't figured it out. He's got a small brain, but we are working with him.
You named him Iggy Smalls, so of course he has a small brain.
Yes, Iggy Smalls. Yes, I'm a Biggie Smalls, a Notorious B.I.G. fan from way back. You can see where my musical, I got Jackson Brown, which is a back in the day hippie type classic rocker.
I love Jackson Brown, and I would never expect Jackson Brown to be living in the same house as Biggie Smalls. I love Biggie Smalls.
No, but you know what? I bet they would have done a collab. I think they could have
done something interesting. Yeah,
Jackson Brown's cool. I think they would have done a collab if Notorious B.I.G. was still around.
Wait a sec. Abigail says we have a cat named that. You have a cat named Jackson Brown, or you have a cat named Iggy Smalls?
Why not both?
Well, because Iggy Smalls is a pretty unique. I mean, it's not Biggie Smalls, so that would surprise me a lot. But I want to get a cat like Biggie Smalls. She says, "Okay, all right,
nice,
cool." I have a new flat since last January, which I really love, and I'm in the process of renovating. And I keep wanting to get a cat, but I live on the second floor, and I have a balcony. And in the summer, the doors open all the time, so I just know that the cat would be gone really quickly. They'd like jump off the balcony or fall off the balcony, and I don't want to spend all my time.
2 feet, so.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not worried about it dying. I'm just worried about it disappearing and me having to go all over the neighborhood searching for it.
So if you're anything like me, I'm kind of a worrier. And we have a short fence, and my dog has jumped it before, and has gone out. We have a main road near us. And even when walking him, I just get worried that he's gonna, break the chain or whatever and head off into traffic. One time he almost did get hit, from what I heard, when he jumped the fence. So now every time I put them out there while I'm working, I'm uncomfortable. I'm like, is he okay? Is he? And I start, going through my crazy brain and wondering if he's okay. And
that's called anxiety. Dave.
Yeah, I
get it.
Yeah, I believe I have that big time.
Hello, Rogue. Hello. Anyone else new? No, I think I've said hello to everyone. Maria is reading a cozy mystery by Swedish author Katarina Bivald. I do not know of Bivald. Never heard of her. Cozy mystery. I recently read a cozy book, and I had always kind of thought the whole idea of cozy books kind of puts me off, because most of the stuff I read is pretty full of conflict and people getting killed horribly and all that sort of stuff. And I read a cozy book, and I was like, that was actually nice.
Yeah.
It was actually nice. It didn't go to the top of my
a favorite of all time, but sometimes it was that.
It was.
You need to give your brain a break.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it was well written. It was a Prayer for the Wild Built by what's her name?
Chambers?
Becky Chambers. Yeah, and it was cute and funny and had some very smart sort of philosophizing in it about having a purpose, or maybe not needing a purpose necessarily. Psalm for the Wild Built. Yeah. Psalm for the Wild Built and a Prayer for the Crown Shy is the second one. I was getting them mixed up, and I audiobooked both of them, and yeah, I really enjoyed them. I was a little surprised. It almost made me think I should read Legends and Lattes. Every time I have looked at that, I'm just like, this sounds like, I don't know, somebody's D&D fantasy. Especially the cover, like an orc and a tiefling hanging out making coffees, and I was just like, that sounds extremely boring to me. But maybe it's not.
There's some good dialogue. You know, there's a coffee scene in Reservoir Dogs that's pretty dope. You know, if you're a fan of Tarantino.
Yeah, no, I love Reservoir Dogs. That's probably my favorite film by him. Really, really good stuff.
Dan, I know you're reading Men at Arms, but when are you starting Spear Cuts Through Water?
I believe it's a summer thing. It's gonna be a summer thing. Thank you. The book is gorgeous, and I can't wait.
You sent it to Dan as well.
I can't wait to get into it.
How many copies of Spear Cuts Through Water have you bought for people, Evie?
Probably at least a dozen.
For those who don't know, Evie sent it to me for Christmas last year.
Now and I just got it from Evie a couple days ago, and
it's really good.
It's so awesome, you know, to receive a book, you know, and just from somebody else. It's just amazing. I've had.
Don't worry, Dan. Next week there's going to be a pile of human crap on your doorstep. Now that I have your address, so
okay. I mean, you know what? I can take the human crap as long as I got the book, you know. I'm good with that. It's really evening it out there. You know what I mean?
You gotta
not a bad trade, yeah. It's really good. I would say just from my own experience, like I think there's probably a lot of people who don't really want a book that's totally different, and that's fine. I personally am always really happy when I bump into a book and I'm like, oh, this is not like anything else. You know, this does something I haven't really seen before.
I think I would love that, actually.
Yeah, but I would say don't even think about judging the book until you finish 2 chapters.
No,
right, and the chapters are pretty big.
DNF anything. If I start it, like you know that it's getting finished. I mean, unless I'm burnt out on a certain thing, I've only DNF'd a few authors, and I had read many books previously from them, and it was just I gave it that college try, and I couldn't do it. But if you're giving me a first author, you best believe I'm going to get through the first book. I
DNF freely and without guilt. My rule is kind of like 200 pages. If I'm 200 pages in and I don't give a shit about your book, I'm not going to keep reading it. Yeah, I don't have the time to force myself to read. The thing with me is I'm like, okay, enjoying.
This has got to get better, right? So at 200 pages, I'm just like, I've already committed this time. It's going to get better. I know it.
Do you know about the sunk cost fallacy? You just described it. The sunk cost fallacy is that after you have invested a certain amount into something,
yes,
that you are more likely to keep wasting money on it because you've already invested time or money on it, because you've already invested a bit on it. And I'm very conscious of the sunk cost fallacy. And I just, like, if I get 200 pages in your book and I'm not enjoying it, I'm not engaged with the characters, I don't really care what's happening, whatever, I'm just like, in the time I could read the other X hundred pages of your book, I could be reading that many pages of another book that I do enjoy. So I don't even think about it. I drop it hard and move on. I've been really lucky. Since I started the channel, I think I've DNF'd 1 book. I don't need to name and shame any authors, but I just got sort of to the middle and I was like, it's kind of good, but I'm also kind of bored. And there's 2 main characters. One is kind of interesting. One is kind of not really very interesting. And I just put it down, moved on.
Yeah,
Jerome can't DNF, or maybe he can, but it's traumatic.
I DNF freely, unless it's like an obligation, like, and I can't get out of that obligation. I will try my damnedest to get out of an obligation if I'm not liking the book, because it's a waste of everyone's time if you're not enjoying the book. But at the same time, like, I acknowledge that there are some books that I pick up at the wrong time. I'm like, I know that this is a me problem, not a book's problem necessarily. So
Totally.
I'll set it down and go back to it for another day.
But you are you.
Yeah.
Like there is nothing in a book that says you must read it or finish it.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and the more that I've read, ever since I started getting back into reading regularly, and kind of making it part of my daily life, 3-4 years ago, I realized kind of what my reading taste is, and I've started to kind of know my reading taste. So if I pick something up and even in the first like 10 pages, I'm like, this is not going to work for me. I know it. So I don't even give it like a set number of pages. I'm just like, is this going to work for me? Okay, no. So
that was actually the thing I DNF. That was the surprise with it, because it had one of the coolest first lines of any book I've read ever. Right? The first sentence in the book is, "I was 7 years old the first time my uncle poisoned me."
You posted
like,
a video about this.
I was like, that sounds really cool,
It does.
when I read it. And then when I started getting into the idea, and the beginning is actually not bad. But then a whole bunch develops where I was like, this is not really going anywhere. And I'm kind of not that excited about anything going on in the book, It's the City of Lies by Sam Hawke, who's a
gotcha.
an
Okay.
Aussie.
I knew that sounded
Aussie author.
familiar.
Yeah, I mentioned it because I did the like last year I did Oztober, Australian authors in October, and I was looking around and I got in touch with an Australian author whose work I really like, E.J. Beaton, and she recommended to me Sam Hawke because they know each other, and they're at the same Aussie author conventions or whatever, and she recommended this book to me, and I was like, yeah, okay. When I started it, I thought it was pretty good. Like, if I was going by the first 2-3 chapters, I would say, okay, this is probably going to be a cool book. But it just sort of went, and got a little boring from there. It just maybe also a me thing. I don't know.
That's how I felt about Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. The first chapter was incredible, but it completely changed, like, tone wise and writing wise, and I'm like, this. If you had kept doing what you were doing in chapter 1, I would have loved it. But yeah.
The setup was pretty good and interesting, but just didn't really go anywhere. Maybe it gets a lot better towards the end. The second half could be amazing. I don't know.
You will never know unless you
Probably
un-DNF
not.
it.
Yeah, well, it's funny because my first thought was, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just like my mood right now. It's not the right book at the right time. I'm not DNFing it. I'm putting it down, and I'll read more later. But the more I thought about it, though, I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to be motivated to go back to that. You would rather read an insulting book than a boring book. What is an insulting book, Jerome?
I think an insulting book is one that is redundant and you're telling me that I'm stupid and I didn't remember what I just read 3 chapters ago. Do you ever get that? You're like, oh yeah, this is an adult fantasy book. I do not need you to reiterate what went on 3 chapters. Like, I remember, I promise.
Over explaining.
Yeah.
Brandon Sanderson. Sorry.
that puts me off really, really hard.
You know who did it also was Brian Lee Durfee.
Okay.
And I liked. Don't get me wrong, I liked his books, but they're there are he follows these tropes, and he's read a lot, and I'm sure many authors have do this and reiterate what's going on. But you just had a chapter where some guy got it. This didn't happen. I'm making this up. Some guy got his tongue cut off and shoved in his ear. This is an adult book. Like, you do not have to explain to me where we are right now, because I get it. I know, and that tends to happen with some authors, because I do see that was a trend, going on. I do have a lot. Okay. I'm sorry. I just saw anyway, that's a trend, and it keeps, I don't tell me something I've already known. That kind of like annoys me. And you're telling me that I'm an idiot.
Well, I think it's the way that I look at reading or books in general is like the author tells a story and the reader reads the story. It's not purely an author, purely a reader. Ideally, it would be like a 50-50 of like the author trusting the reader enough to kind of meet them halfway in the story and kind of interpreting, getting things, whatever. But sometimes the author just over explains everything because they don't necessarily trust the reader. And
that's kind of insulting.
Yeah, that is insulting. And also like, the books that I really, really hate, and I cannot think of one off the top of my head right now, to be quite honest, because I'll DNF them if I get to this point. But the books that I really hate are those authors that expect the reader to do more than 50% of the work. Like, you're supposed to infer like so much stuff. Not to say that like, oh, you have to use your brain.
You didn't finish Malazan Book of the Fallen, so I'm thinking that's one of those books.
Yeah, well, I mean, so
Steven Erikson does expect you to do quite a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah, like I don't want things spelled out for me, but I don't know. I just if there was something else for me to compel me forward, is particularly with Malazan, like I would be willing to put in the work, but I didn't feel the investment. So I was like, why am I going to put in this work if I'm not invested? So
yeah. Understandable. I mean, Malazan to me is the definition of a series that is not for everyone. Yeah. For various different reasons.
It can be. Matt's just going to kick me off stream and be like, she hates Malazan, out.
I'm not that impolite. I just won't invite you to another one ever.
Okay, cool. That's fine.
Hey,
speaking of which, we're actually here to do Sprintz. Why don't we actually read something? Did you want to say something, Dan?
All I wanted to say is, if you guys, do you still hear any background noise when I am off mute?
No.
It comes and goes. It's obviously like your kids running around a little.
No, I think it was my dog got this and was chewing on it behind me. I think that's when I got up and I went to go get it. But
okay,
it could be this one too.
Right.
But I'm going to be conscious.
We're all going to go on mute. Wait. Yeah. Actually, just before we do, we have Tori.
Hey guys, how's it going?
I told you I wasn't sure who exactly was going to join the stream when. Good to see you.
Yeah, well, I wanted to make sure I had to film a video before I jumped on a sprint, and I did that. Important. So, yes.
Very good. You've been productive today. You get a gold star.
Thanks.
Who would have known that we would get gold stars as adults?
Right? I mean, I'm not mad about it.
Isn't it nice to get a gold star every now and then?
It is very nice.
I mean, I think we should get more gold stars as an adult.
I mean, I don't want to brag, but I have.
Nice.
Oh.
Are those horse related?
Yeah.
Yes, that's what
I still have all of mine too.
I have a whole wall of rewards just like that, but it's rewards I give to me just by waking up and not killing somebody that day.
Listen,
all over the wall.
You need to kind of
anybody
congratulate yourself celebrate yourself.
Yes.
So
I have one design award, which is all the way on the top of my bookshelf where no one can see it.
Madison and I were talking yesterday about how like people forget that adults still need like healthy competition and rewards and
Positive
teams
reinforcement.
and like like why do we leave that behind? Like that's one of the things I've been loving about the readathon is everybody's just it's fun and it's a team competition. It's for bragging rights, but it's still fun and it's competitive and friendly.
I don't know about the other teams, but like your team, Tori, has ended up being like so amazingly nice.
Amazing.
That I actually almost don't feel like I belong because I'm a bit of a sarcastic, grumpy old man. And every time I bring my sort of sarcastic reactions or something in there, I'm like, actually, everybody's too nice for me.
It's funny because I've had a few moments too where I'm like, yeah, I need to like just the Slytherins kind of turned down a little bit this month in the chat, and that's okay. That's a good thing. Sometimes. Yeah. Well, and I have to say though too, like everybody in the chat has been so. I don't think you're as much of an outlier as you think you are.
Sure.
Because there's
everyone's probably got their like their nice face on. They're like, I don't want to show my full crazy yet. So.
Despite the fact that we're in a group of nerds,
I haven't been a complete asshole or anything. Just like I'll post a sort of semi-sarcastic GIF or something. I'm like, these very nice people. I don't know if they're gonna like that.
We need some of the.
I like it how we in the Beanie Barbarians chat. Like there is always activity every day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have people that are just good morning, and I get
that don't sleep.
Or
and also like weird time zones.
Yeah.
Like
so I see
when I wake up and say hello,
at like 5:30 a.m. I'm like, what is he doing up?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, you're on the East Coast of America. Why are you replying to me at what is your time in the morning? 5, 6?
Ty's up really late. Ty's always up really late.
That's insane. Evie, are you in the Keymark readathon?
I was one of those people that dropped out which is a good thing because knowing that rereads were not allowed I'm planning on actually. So here's what I'm reading, everyone. I'm literally have 20 pages left, but this is my third reread in 2 years. And of all the books that I've read in April, 3 of the 4 of them, including this, were rereads. So I would have been useless in the readathon.
That's okay. My main activity, my 2 main activities this year, as far as books and my channel go, are rereading things and dropping out of reading commitments. I promised.
We are the same person.
I promised so many things at the beginning of the year, and like every month I've stopped and gone, I literally can't do this. I'm not going to manage, So I dropped out of Shogun first, and eventually I dropped out of the Song of Ice and Fire. And I was just like, there are things I've promised that depend on me. Like I'm buddy reading something with Philip Chase. If I don't do that, then he's reading it by himself. There is no buddy read. There are no discussions. That's over. And I'm hosting a reread for me, read along of Realm of the Elderlings. Since I'm hosting that, if I stop doing it, that's also out. So what are you so excited about, Dan?
Sorry, I saw one
American football.
I think your name is Steve.
Okay.
The Eagles just got a really good running back from the Lions, and
sports.
Sorry about that. I couldn't.
Sports ball. Yeah.
Good thing I was on mute because there was a lot of curses going on there.
I was going to say it looked like you were loud.
Because there's the NFL football draft is this week.
Okay.
And we're things are happening for football.
Yeah, my husband has been screaming at the TV, saying Patriots and stuff. But sorry, I got excited because one old geek, I think
Steve.
Steve. It is Steve. Okay, I'm like, I think his name is Steve.
Steve is awesome.
He's in Hollywood. That makes me so happy. I love Dollywood.
Yeah, One Old Geek. Is that who you're talking about,
Yeah.
Steve? I really like Steve and I. We have the gray beard thing, so we're already friends.
We've got
You know,
some good gray beard representation in the Beanie Barbarians for sure.
Absolutely.
big time.
Absolutely. So just before Tori joined, we were about to start a sprint. So why don't we do that? No, it's fine. Glad
What
to
are
see
you
you
reading,
here.
Corey?
So I'm kind of switching back and forth. I have to finish up a indie sci-fi called Those Once Forgotten, which is book 2 in her series. And I'm about 70% in that one. And then I also just started Before They Are Hanged.
Yeah.
So I am officially vlogging that one as well. I wasn't sure if I was going to, and I finally committed to it today. So.
Oh, I'm so excited. I really am. I'm so happy she's starting Before They Are Hanged.
Yeah,
'Cause
I'm liking it so far.
This is appropriate that Evie decided to join today because she sent me this for Christmas.
Also,
So everybody enjoy your read. Let's say, what time is it? Okay, it's exactly past almost. So let's
I'm so glad I don't have to do the math this time.
on the hour, we will be back. Enjoy your read. Hello. Hello, Joanna.
Joanna.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Glad you could join us. Joanna and
I think I have a stream on. Sorry, hold on one sec.
Joanna and I were sort of joking for the last 3 or 4 weekends. I posted somewhere that I was starting Sprintz, and she said, "I'm busy. I can't
I'm
join."
sorry.
But this time she made it, which is great.
Yay, I'm really glad to be here. Our Storm of Swords discussion got postponed at the last second.
I
so-
saw that. Yeah.
Cool.
An animal-related emergency. Whose animal has an emergency?
It was Alex's wife. Yeah, it was a horse emergency. So
Oh no.
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Wait, Alex has horses?
his wife does, I guess. I didn't know that until today. I know, right? Oh, look at
Alex
me.
is my new best friend, or at least his wife is. And she doesn't know it yet. So
Yeah. You know, what's interesting about horses is like, I feel like this year, that's something that I've been really appreciating in books is when authors, especially in fantasy worlds, where there's a lot of, we depend on horses so much in fantasy. And when authors really pay attention to horses, I love that.
I've heard that Jenny Wirtz is a big
Oh, yeah.
horse lady and horse author.
Oh, I've never seen anybody be more detailed with equestrian knowledge than Jenny Wirtz. Yeah.
that's
And
why
haven't
I
you
am-
just read All the Pretty Horses, Joanna?
I did. I read All the
Yep.
Pretty Horses and
Okay.
oh man. I read that and The Crossing. We just finished The Crossing the other day, book 2 in that trilogy. I love, he also pays a lot of attention to details with horses. But if you're a horse lover, be warned because there's a lot of heartbreaking tragedy that happens to horses too. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, I already told everybody else, but I'm reading
Yay!
The Spear Cuts Through Water.
Are you loving it as much as Evie?
Kindly gifted to me by Evie. I don't know if it's possible to love it as much as Evie, but I'm liking it quite a lot. It just hit a point where I was like, okay, this is really fucking weird. I won't get into it because spoilers, obviously. But Evie, I'll talk with Evie about it later. But it's a bizarre book, like in the best kind of way. It's really, really. I was saying earlier, it just I really like running into a book that is totally unlike anything else I've read in the genre.
Mhm.
You know, which obviously doesn't happen often.
Mhm.
But reading this, I'm like, I wouldn't know what fantasy book to compare it to. You know, it's written in such a different way. Just the writing, the structure, the world. I mean, the world is kind of wuxia, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, those kind of movies with the magic combat and things are just all sort of out of proportion, bigger and more epic than anything. But the way it's written is, in my experience, pretty unique.
Wow.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I have no idea how it compares to The Vanished Birds because I haven't read The Vanished Birds yet. I've only heard things, but
Really good.
Spear Cuts Through Water is pretty interesting. Yeah.
Wow.
I've read enough fantasy. It's like really rare if a fantasy book surprises me much anymore, you know, because it's like, it's not exactly formulaic, but there are certain things that kind of happen, you know. And there have been a number of bits of this book where I'm like, what? Really? Okay. Wow. All right. I didn't expect that. Yeah.
Well,
It's good.
Joanna, you know how I like to tap stuff, but like
I'm like that too when I tab stuff. Yeah.
it's
That's a good sign though.
basically every page. So
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you guys a question about that though, because you were bringing up it's hard for a fantasy book to surprise me and that, and then about the formulaic thing, because I've been thinking about this a lot when it comes to fantasy books lately. Because when I think about what draws me to the genre, like on a subconscious level, like I want to pick up a fantasy book specifically, unless it's like a very modern take, like The Spear Cuts Through Water. I feel like if I think of the genre, my mind is kind of going somewhat towards formula, somewhat towards tropes. And then at
Yeah.
the same time, we have a lot of criticism about, oh, it's formulaic or it follows tropes. And I know I've said that before too, sometimes. So I guess I've been wondering about that. What do you all feel about fantasy and about formulas?
I also, I mean, I think every genre is a genre because it has some expected things. in
Yeah.
it, right. That's what makes it a genre. So I don't mind tropes and sort of the expected patterns that you run into in fantasy. It's much more than a question of how well the author writes. You know, like, is the writing actually interesting? Are the characters interesting? Is the action exciting? And that kind of thing. And that can be in there
Yeah,
no matter what tropes or patterns are there.
Yeah, like, I mean, for me, regardless of whether it's more traditional or more experimental, like, is there depth to what the author is doing, or at least my perception of what the author is doing? And I feel like I say this pretty frequently, and I feel like a broken record, but like, I like to have a dialogue with the text of what I'm reading. Like, ideally, that I want every book to let me have a conversation with it. And if it's just kind of surface level, I most of the time, 9 times out of 10, I do not have that experience, and those are not the books that I really am drawn to. But we were talking about cozy books earlier. Like, sometimes my brain kind of needs that, and those are like more of the kind of cozy type fantasy romances, whatever you want to call them. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the trope thing, even with like probably my very favorite author in fantasy, Stephen Erickson, like, it's not that Stephen Erickson's not writing with tropes, it's that he's writing with tropes and twisting them all.
Yeah.
He's not giving you what you expect from pretty much any trope. Every time he throws a trope in there, it's because he's doing something subversive with it, and it's backwards, or it's
intentionality there.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely clear that that's what he's doing consciously.
Well, and I think that goes back to like kind of what you guys have alluded to, where there's a place for people who are really embracing the tropes and the archetypes that we all love and know in fantasy. And if they're doing it intentionally and really well, I'll read it and love it. If they're doing something different and they're doing it intentionally and doing it really well, I'll read it and love it. And it, like kind of you guys mentioned, going back to the characters, if the characters are well done, it supersedes what's being used in the elements or the tropes or the setting. And those are kind of just the background or the addition to the characters for me. So I'm good with either.
Yeah, it's very much
for me. I would say that my favorite stories are the ones that subvert tropes. Baker,
Like this
First
one?
Law, exactly. And for me, the ones that are different, I tend to gravitate toward. However, I did read the 5 Warrior Angels. And they had the quest trope in there, and I was just like, but you know what, you have your Abercrombie, and you had a quest trope. It's just about what you do with it. Like, if I like those characters, I'll go to Australia with you, man. But if I'm not, feeling a certain character, a lot of fantasy tends to gravitate toward a younger audience. And when we get to the older audiences, and like Erickson does it differently. We were on a quest in Deadhouse Gates, and I didn't feel like we were on a quest, because of there was just so much going on, and the way he presented it was different. And I really, I haven't read too many fantasy books that just stick with those tropes. What I do like is when they're subverted, or when they're made fun of. So that's something that interests me. But for me, I think everybody's right. Like, it's how the author presents it. And if it catches me, it catches me. Like, a chosen one, like, I'm okay with it on how, if it's done correctly. But if it's, if it doesn't draw me in, and give me something new, like anything, then it's kind of a negative for me.
Yeah,
I find listening to, I don't know how many hundreds of booktubers I'm subscribed to, but like listening to booktubers, it seems like fantasy is a genre where readers tend to be very character focused.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody necessarily. I mean, I've certainly talked to people that don't care that much about characters, but a lot of people do. And I'm secondarily an action person. Like, I like big epic shit. I'm on the edge of my seat. I don't know what's going to happen next. I like that kind of thing. But if the characters are amazing, I'll cruise through a book with almost no action, or a trilogy like the Farseer trilogy. There's not much action in Farseer.
Yep.
Like, what really happens, you could summarize in a 200-page book, kind of like the real high points of action. But I loved it because the characters are so cool. Yep. Like, there are so many amazing, legendary, I will never forget them characters in there that I'm like, you could be washing dishes with this character and I'd probably enjoy it. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think too, sometimes there's almost too much of a pressure on authors to do the new and the weird and the quote unquote original. And sometimes we lose the just telling a good story in that people are trying so hard to come up with the new and the cool and the different and the subversions or whatever, that they focus more on that instead of, this is just a really good story with really good characters. Yeah. And so I think there's definitely like, sometimes I feel like we lean too far that direction.
I totally agree with you.
Taking risks is important, but tell a good story first.
Yeah.
Well, what Jerome said, I probably butchered your name. I apologize. Subversions become new tropes with Time Circle of Trope Life. Yeah, it's it's amazing. Not just with like books, but with really anything in the world, like fashion. Like every 20, 30 years, the same things keep popping up, and like now we're getting back into ripped jeans and oh dear God, low-waisted pants. Please, dear God, don't do low-waisted pants anymore. But yeah, no, it's just it's cyclical. Everything's cyclical, and there's formula for a reason. Much like how there's normal for a reason, and it's really what you do with those elements to tell a good story, like what you said, Tori. Like, rather than just saying, okay, I need to add a chosen one, or I need to add this, like, well, instead of the author saying, oh, I just need to add a chosen one, it's like, well, why are you adding a chosen one, and adding that kind of depth and this complexity to the story?
Are you just putting together trope Lego, or have you actually got a story that requires the chosen one?
Exactly. Like, are you just checking a box, or are you actually serving your story?
Well,
I like what Jerome said here. That is one of the things. Like, I'm sold on a book as soon as I wish I could do something with one of the characters.
Yep.
Like Krupp for those who haven't read Malazan Book of the Fallen and don't know Krupp, that's where he's from. And he's a very flamboyant, mysterious, infuriating character.
I hate Krupp.
Oh, I
I'm
love Krupp.
sorry.
So-
Team Krupp. Team Krupp. I'm
I
totally Team
will
Krupp.
say that I did like Krupp from Gardens of the Moon.
Krupp is awesome.
I
Like
thought
as
he
soon
was
as
so annoying in
as
Target
soon as they
Cartoons.
introduced Krupp, I was like, I want to be sitting at that table in that bar with them and have a glass of wine with Krupp. Because yes, he's annoying, but he's also very entertaining, or it was to me
Yeah.
anyway.
And I'm
Yeah.
not saying he shouldn't have been in the story. I
Yeah,
appreciated him in the story, but
Yeah.
at the same time, yeah. I think
Well, and I'm
Tori does it.
interested to see, like, since I read those 10 years ago, my 21-year-old perception of Krupp will probably be different than my 32-year-old perception of Krupp. But like, I just filmed my top 10 fantasy books video, and I have a YA fantasy on there all the way up to Malazan, and it's like the common thread with all of these is that they were really good at what they were doing. I wasn't
Right.
going into them expecting them to all be the same. They were just within their, category, genre, tropes, etc. They were the best of what I've read.
I love you saying that too, Tori, because I feel like a lot of times I found myself thinking or saying in my head, I'm a very character driven reader, or I'm a very, or I need the balance between plot and character, or I need this or I need that. And the more I read, the more I feel like I keep getting proven wrong by really good authors. Any good author can prove me wrong about anything I think or any bias I have towards a certain way a story should be told.
Abercrombie just put me on the spot like crazy, because I've always said I can read a book that's just characters and no plot and be totally fine. And then I read First Law of the Blade itself, and I was like, okay, maybe I appreciate plot more than I thought I did. Like, I was still fine,
Yeah.
but I definitely like
you don't recognize what you had until it's gone,
right, exactly.
Like-
and I
like
still
I-
liked it. I still liked it, but it
That's
was
a
just
funny example to me though, because when I read The Blade itself, I also didn't. I got kind of bored at 70%, and then I at that time though, I would have told you I was a balance between plot and character driven. And then I read the sequel. I read Before They're Hanged, and that was the book that I realized I could be a character driven reader. I just didn't care. I was like,
It's so good.
there is a
Yeah, I
plot.
can't wait till you jump into it, Tori. Hey guys, I'm going to Bounce Zone. I'm gonna jump off here. It's been a pleasure, everybody. Okay.
Yeah,
Good to
thanks
see
for
you later,
joining
Dan.
us.
Thanks, guys. I'll see you later.
See you later. Yeah, that was the book though where I was like, there is a plot in First Law. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't even care.
there.
Like, I didn't even care. I just
Yeah.
I was just happy to be with the characters,
Yeah.
that combination of characters on the page. So I can't wait to hear your thoughts on that particular book.
Well, I started book 2, and that was where I knew I was going to enjoy the trilogy overall, because book 1, I had some reservations about certain things. And then I started book 2, and I immediately was like, the way that book 2 starts, I was excited to be back with the characters. And that's where I was like, yep, all right, we're good.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny though, because I keep finding myself trying to pigeonhole myself, like, oh, I'm just this kind of reader, I'm that kind of reader. And the next thing I know, I'm like, no, you're not.
I just like a good book.
Yeah, I just like a good book. And I think it just comes down to the writer, and different writers have different strengths. And if they play off their strengths as writers, and then it works. If the writing is, if it's well written, that's the kind of a generic answer. But, I think it's interesting just to see how that works.
Like, unpopular opinion, I love the love triangle trope, but it is so rarely done well, at least from what I've seen. Yes, Guns of the Dawn does do that, and it's so like I don't know, so just because there's a trope is done badly doesn't mean it's bad. Like miscommunication trope. When it's done well, oh my god, it can work so well. But it is so often done so poorly. And it's just a lazy plot device.
Can you explain the miscommunication trope to me? Because I think I just read a book that had it, but I liked it. And I know everybody hates miscommunication.
So the way that it's mostly done is it's just the lack of communication, essentially. But the way that I perceive it and the way that I would ideally like it done is where it's actually a miscommunication. There is an misinterpretation of what is said, or misunderstanding of intention, and kind of goes from there, not just, hey, you're not communicating.
Or
Yeah.
like
that's
the entire
usually the way it's done is that you've got a couple of characters or a bunch of characters who have information they should share with each other,
but don't.
which would make things a lot easier for them, but they don't share it. So everybody gets confused and does stupid things.
Or
That's
like
usually the way it's done,
the
which is
entire plot of the
lazy.
book would have been 300 pages shorter if one person had said one thing.
yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's pretty stupid. I mean, it just reminded me of, have you guys seen House of the Dragon? The new, okay. It's not really a big spoiler, but there's basically a character who wants something from another character, and that character has a lot of guilt about something. And the first character accuses them of something without saying exactly what they're accusing them of. They're being kind of indirect and suggestive. Second character assumes it's the thing they feel guilty about, but it's not. And therefore they do what the first character wants because they feel so guilty and they feel like they've been caught, and that worked really well. It was a really well done scene where these two characters are talking and you're like, dude, she's not talking about the thing you're worried about. Chill out. You're giving yourself away. And he's like, yes, you've got me, and it worked out really well. But yeah, usually it's just somebody should have said something which would have made the book not exist. Basically,
So what was the book, Joanna?
Oh, it was the one I was talking to you about, the Arrows trilogy. It was the second book in that. So there was Arrows for the Queen, and I cannot remember the second one. The second one, Mercedes Lackey, yeah. And it was written in the 80s, but my goodness, I loved it. I loved it, and it did a lot of things that I think modern audiences will be split about, because it does do a lot of the telling rather than showing kind of thing. And I know Evie, that's like a big pet peeve of Evie's. So I'm like hesitant to recommend it to you, Evie, even though it has incredible horse stuff in that book. But it also has the miscommunication trope, I would say, in book 2. But I feel like there was good reason for it at the same time, possibly. It worked for me. I personally thought that the trilogy did an amazing job, though, like dealing with some very, I would say it's like a light fantasy, but very nuanced, like in the way that it dealt with emotions and relationships between characters. I was so impressed with that. And it had awesome LGBTQ representation, which we think is modern
already.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. It had a lot of things like that. It was very sex positive. I mean, there were just a lot of things that I thought were pretty ahead of its time for its time. So I liked it.
I read a long time ago, I read something by Mercedes Lackey, and I can't remember what it was. A long time ago, probably when it came out in the 80s.
Wow.
My memory sucks.
No, she's one of those authors that I regret not getting to, because there were a lot of really highly regarded female adult fantasy authors of that generation. And I see them on the shelves. And I think part of it was I just never knew where to start with those authors. And then, I picked this one up actually because Elliot Brooks kept mentioning it. And I thought that was interesting because I know she tends to like more modern fantasy, but she really loved at least the first book in the trilogy. She wasn't so crazy about books 2 and 3, but I decided to give it a shot. And it came up on my script. So I did listen to it mostly on audio, but I really enjoyed it.
Nice.
Okay, cool. Shall we do another sprint?
I'm getting close. I want to finish.
Yeah.
I'm reading, I'm finishing, hold on, let me find the cover. Those Once Forgotten by N.C. Scrimger, I think is how you say her her last name. It's a space opera, sci-fi, end of the world Twisted First Contact kind of vibe.
Hmm.
But I'm at 84% right now.
Cool.
Twisted First Contact. I like that.
Yeah, it's subverting the first contact trope.
Ah, cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Cool. So
Sure.
enjoy your reading.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
You're a minute early, sir.
He was last
Yeah.
time, too.
I always set the alarm a minute beforehand and gives time for. Yes, Rogue. I am wearing a BPRD T-shirt.
Nice.
I don't know what that means.
That is the
From
era
Hellboy.
for Paranormal Research and Defense from Hellboy. Yes. I am a big Hellboy fan. Not the movies. I'm not so crazy about the movies, but the comics are amazing. For anyone who knows Hellboy, I just finished my library edition collection, which is Hellboy published in 6 thick, beautiful hardback editions, which are actually bigger than the original comic. So you're getting the artwork even nicer than you did in the individual issues originally. So
Nice.
yeah. Yeah, that's a problem, Butling. Can't continue reading my book because my dog has fallen asleep on it. I am sorry to hear that. This is interesting. Good-looking honky Peter North, an old adult film star, retired. Wife and Peter are tuning in. Nice. Mr. Navo is here.
Oh, Vinland Saga is so good.
Vinland Saga is pretty good. I've had which one is it? I think it's 6 and 7 next to my bed for a while, and I just haven't been in the mood to continue it lately, but I will.
Yeah, I got up to number 7, so I finished the second arc, I think. But
Right.
But the first arc is, they're both really good, both arcs.
The second arc, I was a little bored with the beginning of it. I mean, it's setting up new things, so it goes through this sort of epic conclusion of the first arc, and then it slows down a lot. But it picked up. I've gotten into it, but I just haven't been in the mood for it lately.
Yeah.
Magnus is reading A Way of a Dime.
Nice. That's your 4th or 5th readathon book, Marquelin. Trying to remember. I could just look on the spreadsheet, but I'm lazy.
Yeah. Can we do longer sprints? Yeah, we'll do 3 sprints, so they don't have to be longer, but you'll get back to the book.
I'm at 95% on mine, so I'm like,
oh well, okay. Next,
so close.
maybe next sprint you'll
yeah.
you'll get it. Kev,
Yeah,
you are not too
finished
late.
this.
We're gonna do one more.
I finished this and I started this during the sprint.
Are you rereading the Bancroft?
Yeah.
Evie?
Yeah, look at all the tabs in her book already. So
Yeah, I'm in my era of rereading because apparently my brain is just like, I just want to reread things I've read before and I loved. So
Yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, I've been rereading more than usual, I think, the last couple of years.
I have a thing, and apparently Evie definitely doesn't, but I have a thing. Like if I finish a book, pretty much any book, I always give myself kind of a day before starting anything else. Like I would never. I was actually looking at where I am in Spear Cuts Through Water, and I was like, yeah, that's enough. I won't finish it during the sprints because it would be kind of weird if I finished a book during the sprints and refused to start another one, and I'd just be sitting there while everyone's reading and I'm not reading. But
well, so I'm actually normally I am like that. If it's a book I've never read before, like I want to kind of sit back and ruminate on it, reflect on it, all that stuff. But because
you're rereading,
both
yeah.
rereads, I'm just
Yeah,
like,
sure.
yeah, I'll just start right into it. So
yeah. Liam, how are you liking Midnight Tides? Midnight Tides was a weird book for me.
I love Midnight Tides.
I do too. The second time I read it, I was super in love with it. The first time I read it, the first quarter of it, I wanted to punch Erickson in the throat.
I think that's understandable. And I always tell people, because Midnight Tides is so everybody gushes about it so much.
It
But
is great.
I feel like it it takes a while to get going at first. The prologue
Yeah.
is phenomenal, but then
Yeah.
it takes a while to get going because you're in a new continent, new
That was
cast.
the one that stopped me in the series because I got to the end of House of Chains, and even though you have like switches in cast and setting, Midnight Tides was the most jarring of those for me.
Midnight Tides, you are given nothing to
No.
hold on to.
No.
Nothing.
So I think
It's
that
like,
was the one
this
that
is
I
a
fell
new
off on.
series. You know,
Yep.
it just feels like such a break. I was pissed off, and I was anger reading it
I didn't
until
feel that
about
way.
a quarter of the way through, and then I was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool though.
I think what
So-
hooked me in that one is that we have a specific character that we follow. I'll just say, I don't know if I could say it or not. And so we're getting his backstory in Midnight Tides, or how he ends up the way he ends up in book 4.
Yeah.
So I think that was what kind of got me oriented into the
Mm.
story. But once it gets going, it's phenomenal. It's
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
phenomenal.
Once I got past being angry at Erickson for taking away everything I loved,
Yeah.
then I was like, oh, okay, I love this too. So
Yeah.
it's good. I especially once it gets to Lether and we get Tehil and Bug.
Yeah.
Like once I met Tehil and
Yeah.
Bug, I was like,
Yes.
okay, this is pretty cool.
Especially
pretty
because of Tehol and Bug, but I've been telling Murphy over and over again, Murphy Napier, I've been like, I think this is going to be her favorite book. I was like, this is going to be
Right.
her favorite. I'm pretty sure of it. And it sounds like it is going to be her favorite from what she's been sharing.
Yeah.
I think she's finishing it this weekend, but
Yeah,
oh,
yeah, it's pretty awesome.
yeah.
Ron, that's kind of my experience too. I stalled on the farm arc a little bit and wasn't that grabbed by it. Like
I can see
Vinland
that. I
Saga.
liked it, but I can
Yeah.
understand it. It definitely
But-
slows in pace a little bit or takes a
Yeah.
different approach. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just sort of starting to pick up again, but I haven't continued it, but I will. I will.
Mm.
Liam says he's digging it. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm very excited. I'm officially committing to restarting Gardens of the Moon here in May.
Yay.
And cannot wait. I'm so excited. But I originally was reading the series without being in any kind of fantasy community. And now I think that the series is going to be much easier for me to get through because I have one.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
Yeah. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm so
agree.
excited. I can't
Yeah.
wait. It's like, you know what? Heck with it. I'm going to read it in May.
I kind of wish I had, like, the first time I read it, I was also like in complete seclusion. I didn't have anyone
Mhm.
I knew who had ever read it. And now that I've seen the community and been one of the people who answers questions sometimes in the community, I'm like, man, I wish I had that when I read it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I was the same way. I didn't have anybody for books 1 and 2 when I read it. Like there was very little to no Malazan content on YouTube at the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't know compassion was a main theme until after book 2. And I kept hearing people talk about it. And then I didn't really see it until book 3. But yeah, there's something to be said about the pros and cons of having a Malazan community when it comes to that series.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, if someone had said to me, "Oh, you're about to read Midnight Tides," just be warned, it like nothing you know is in it. I might have been a little more chill about it at the beginning.
Mhm.
And if someone had said, "Keep reading because one of the coolest buddy pairs ever appears in that book," I might have been a bit more into it. But yeah, eventually it's Erickson, and I love his writing. So eventually I definitely got into it.
I'm
I
sorry.
thought about-
Lily. It's like so addictive. Like every time I'm in a chat with Matt and Tori, I just like want to talk about Malazan. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It
I
feels-
think I've not broken my record yet of never having a stream in which I do not mention Malazan.
it's so easy to do.
Mhm.
Yeah, because it's just like in a way, I mean, it's not quite this extreme, but in a way, after I finished the whole 10 books, I was like, this has fucking ruined me for fantasy now.
Yep.
That's how I felt
Like-
with Realm of the Elderlings.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like pretty much everything I read now, I compare to those two series. You know, I look at anything I read and I'm like, this doesn't do characters as well as Hobb. This doesn't do epic action as well as Erickson. And why are we not juggling multiple stories like Malaz? You know, like sometimes I read
Because some of
something with
us
only
don't
one
have
story.
big enough brains for that, Matt. Like I can't.
I'm
Oh.
not surprised.
I
mean,
have
I'm-
multiple countries in my book, and I'm still like, okay.
Yeah.
I've heard fantastic things about your book, though, Tori. The
Oh,
Phase one.
Phase?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
keep hearing
thank you.
amazing things about it. And I know you're writing an epic fantasy right now. Is that
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, yep. Bloodstones. It'll be out if all goes well. It'll be out end of 2023.
That's exciting.
I have committed to, like, because Tori's a friend, I bought myself Phased. And Tori immediately went, I'm not sure you'll like it.
I think what trips people up about it is because it is younger protagonists and there is a school setting, people immediately go
It's
to, oh,
YA-ish.
it's
Yeah.
YA.
I
And
like
all
that.
of the stereotypical things that people assign to that.
Mhm.
I mean, the tag is there, but I feel like Phased is pretty. I mean, it's more along the like Six of Crows and like the YA, you know.
So, we were talking earlier about like genre and like whatever. So, Joanna, I still will fight you that this is not young adult. Like, I know you say it verges on young adult or whatever, and I'm like, but it's not. And I keep thinking about it. I'm like, just because it's not like, just because something, not necessarily just this. By the way, I'm just teasing you, Joanna.
No, it's fine. I deserve that. I deserve it. Go ahead.
Evie and Joanna are at war officially now.
No. This is a great conversation.
hate
I love
each
this
other.
topic. I love this topic. Go ahead.
But yeah, so like in general, just because something doesn't, I don't know why my camera just went. Bleh! Anyways, but I don't know, I'm gonna do the
put your
Alan
hand
thing,
over it.
Like, there you go.
Put your hand over it and then take it away. It'll
I think you have to
briefly
stick your
focus.
face in it.
Yeah, whatever.
Even worse.
Listen, let's
Okay.
see what happens. Oh God,
Evie's just blurry today.
it's true. It's Saturday. Oh, there we go. We're back.
There we go.
There you go.
Anyways, so yes, sorry, distracted easily. Whoa. Just because something is not dark or has graphic things in it doesn't necessarily make it for a younger audience.
Mhm.
Even though Vasya is 17, you know, it doesn't make it younger. Like, I don't know. It doesn't have to be like graphic and have like blood and gore and sex and like graphic stuff going on.
No, I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Philip,
No,
Philip and I talked about YA a lot in one of our chats, and I mean, at its root, YA is just a marketing label,
Mhm.
right? They want to try and sell to younger people,
Or
and
you just get put into that category and you just it's like, okay.
right. I mean, we categorize things, yeah. Like, is
Yep.
this fantasy or is it science fiction or is it mystery or whatever? And like, to me, like, I feel like a book is YA when it's obviously written in a way that is intended to be easily understandable by younger people.
Mhm.
Right? That's YA to me. Like, there are coming of age stories, which I would never call YA
Mhm.
because they're
Yes.
not written in a way that, you know, a teenager is meant to be able to enjoy or understand everything or whatever. You know, like a lot of Stephen King is coming of age stories, but I would never call them YA.
Right.
So,
Well, and I think a lot of people with YA kind of immediately put young protagonists in that category.
right.
And that's something that I want to do an imposter syndrome on, is talking about young protagonists in adult fantasy, because I think way too often they
Yeah.
are kind of shuffled into the YA category. And it's like, but that they shouldn't be. And I know people that will legitimately say, I don't want to read adult fantasy if there is a young protagonist, because then it's not adult fantasy. And I'm like, I mean, that's totally up to you, but I completely
But
disagree
stupid.
with the premise.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I'm not going to force anybody to read anything, but
No,
I don't agree with that. So
don't read what you don't want to read, but
Right.
that's a stupid attitude.
Yeah.
Like that, it's YA because there's a young protagonist. Like Joanna and I were just talking recently about The Severing Sun by Vaughan Roycroft. Indie thing I read earlier this year, and I think Joanna just recently read it. It's definitely not YA, but the main character is a teenager. Malice, John Gwynne. Like, there are numerous characters, but one of the primary characters is also a teenager. You know,
What would
it's
make,
definitely not
I'm
YA.
just curious because I about Von Roycroft's book. What would, in your opinion, about it specifically make it not YA?
that'd be my question too. I read part of it and found the style to feel very YA.
Okay. It didn't, I don't know. It didn't feel YA to me, maybe because there was quite a lot of violence in it and relatively graphic, which
See,
isn't
I don't
necessarily
know.
not YA.
I don't know.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
because I really don't know that I liked your previous definition, Matt, about, because I think that, and when I say YA, I don't mean it to be pejorative. I don't mean it to mean that because it's, I like what you said earlier, Matt, just circling back to that it's a book that could be read by somebody who's younger or older, and it can cross a spectrum of readers and be understandable to a spectrum of readers. If I put Malaz and Book of the Fallen in the hands of 17-year-old Joanna, I don't think I wouldn't have been ready for that kind of narrative. And not to say there aren't 17-year-olds who couldn't appreciate it, but to appreciate all the depth of theme that Erickson is exploring in that story, I feel like it does take a little bit of maturity. It takes a little bit. I don't know if that's too biased on my part to think that, or it's too stereotypical on my part to think that. But I feel like when it comes to the coming of age thing, I also, so I guess that's what I'm saying, is that I feel like a wide spectrum of readers, though, with the YA, it can be read. That doesn't mean that there's not dark material. I read a YA book called Girls of Paper and Fire so many years ago. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. And that dealt pretty hardcore with rape. I mean, there was definitely some intense rape. I mean, that was what the subject was about, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I've read YA with all types of abuse and trauma. Like, that's there in YA literature. But I think that the way it's approaching themes, the way it's written, it's accessible to delve into those themes for a younger audience.
Yeah.
As well as older one.
I mean, I think I was just thinking about it. Like, what's definitely a YA book? Like, Harry Potter is definitely YA. Right? Like, I don't think anyone would fight you about that. But why? I mean, like, I guess some of it is, if the whole point of it is kids growing up, that's part of it, but that's the whole point. That's the whole story, really. I mean, like Harry Potter, there's all sorts of stuff going on, but the real point is it's teenagers figuring out how to be adults, really. And that's not the case in like Stephen King books that have a coming of age aspect. You know, nobody would call, I think, The Dark Tower YA, even though there is definitely a kid in it who is growing up, and that's a big part of it, but it's not the whole point. I don't know. I don't have good definitions, and every time I've come up with a good definition for anything, then I've read another book and it's changed it. You know,
I wonder. This is my off the cuff kind of, what I'm about to say is going to be totally gray. It's like up to interpretation, but I wonder if it's the nuance that is written into this story. So like the early Harry Potter book, taking Harry Potter as an example, the early Harry Potter books, there was a very, very simplistic writing style. It was very like on the nose, very, I don't want to say preachy, but like there wasn't a lot of nuance in regards to like who is good, who is bad, what the theming was. And I think the books aged as she wrote them, like with the readers over time. It's been years since I've read those books, but like Kelly Barnhill as an example, like The Girl Who Drank the Moon. That is a YA, I would argue, older middle grade book that as an adult I absolutely adored it. Like there was so much that I got out of it that I don't think a younger child would enjoy. But I think they would also just enjoy it on a surface level.
Well, is it maybe more of a like, are you looking at the world from a young protagonist point of view, and that's the lens through which the story is being told as a whole? Or is it a child in a very adult setting? Maybe there's some kind of a difference. Because I think about that with, like, you know, I have child characters in the book I'm writing, but they are, you know, in this very adult space. So I don't know if that factors into it some as well.
Well, that kind of... So I'm thinking of a book. This is the only book that I can think of as an example. But if we use that as like a drawing point or drawing point, point of separation, there's a book called The Icarus Girl by Helen Oyeyemi. It is single-handedly it's told from the perspective of a 9-year-old girl. And she feels like a 9-year-old girl. The author is not speaking down about the character, is not like treating the child like it's dumb. Like, it's a very smart, intelligent child. So technically, if we're the story is told from her perspective, so by that definition it would be YA. However,
right,
there's a lot of, like, it's a horror book. And
well, like my friend Baptiste Ponsonwu, who writes the oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the series name. It's Yellow Sky Revolt is the first one. Yeah. That one is told the Three Kingdoms, China, Yellow Turban Revolt, and all of that kind of stuff. Massive civil wars, told through the eyes of a young boy, and like it is from a young protagonist point of view. But he's in the middle of this incredibly brutal war, and then it kind of shifts back to this school setting, and so it's a lot of both. And that's, again, kind of going back to what Brian said in the comments. Like, that's why I struggle to say, like, oh, I prefer adult fantasy, or because if it's a good story, does it matter what category it's in? I don't know. Yeah. Not really.
No, I mean, if you enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and that's why I like with Phased, Matt, I honestly think you would really appreciate some of the exploration in it, and that's what I think would get you, if anything.
Yeah, cool.
So
I basically, due to my experience in the first part of the year, I'm promising as little as I can and committing to as little as I can right now.
Same.
But I've got it on my list for sure to read this year.
I'll be very interested in your thoughts on it for sure.
Yeah. Me too.
I guess that's my thing. Is I feel like with I don't know, maybe the YA label is kind of a bad label. Maybe
I think it generally doesn't help.
No, maybe it doesn't help at all. Maybe it's just more like accessible versus more complex. Maybe something along those lines, or I don't know. I think that it's the only reason why I would use it as an expectation of accessibility is if you're wanting to describe a book to somebody who hasn't read it. And if you're wanting to, I don't know. I mean, the marketing, I mean, that's what marketing is. That's the whole purpose of marketing, right? Is to make it clear what this expectation is going to be. Yeah.
I have to interrupt the YA discussion because this is one of my hobby horses. When I started reading it, I didn't have anyone to talk to, and Malazan, and I was pronouncing it in my head, Malazan.
Same, Malazan.
And then I realized it's a fucking adjective. This is one of the only made up words where I actually care how it's pronounced. And I care for myself. I'm not going to tell anyone else they have to pronounce it anyway. But it is describing things that are from Malaz, right? Malaz is an island, or Malaz. Malaz is a made up word, but the adjective Malazan is things from Malaz. So pronouncing it Malazan is like pronouncing it American. And pronouncing it Malazan would be like pronouncing it American or Canadian or Australian. So once I realized that, because I heard Stephen Erickson say Malazan, I was like, oh, it's an adjective. So of course Malazan makes sense. And Malazan doesn't. But
I don't think I say it right still. I say Malazan, and I think that's wrong.
And I'm pretty sure
you see,
Malazan.
the thing is, if you decide that the island, which is a made up word, is Malaz or Malaz or anything, just put on the end of it.
See, I could still screw that up in my head. I could still say Malaz. It's Malaz.
I mean,
Yeah, it's Malaz, and then it's
You're right.
Malazan.
It's pronounced, right?
I still
So
say it wrong because I've just had a habit. But
No, what I'm saying is the island, you can call it whatever you want because it is a totally made up word with no grammatical kind of sense behind it. So call it Malazan, call it Malazan. Those I think are totally fine because you're following the grammatical rule of an adjective describing a place. So, in the end, pronounce it however you want. I don't care. It's up to you. It's your book in your head. But to me, it made sense. It's like, oh, it's an adjective. Okay. But the other part of her question is, how do they pronounce it in the audiobooks? The audiobooks are totally irrelevant because nobody, when they recorded the audiobooks, asked Stephen Erickson anything. And they pronounce a number of things in very strange ways in the audiobooks. So don't worry about the audiobooks. We can go back to YA if you want.
I guess the other point I was going to make. Oh, Evie. So, what is it about Winter Night Trilogy that makes you say it's adult, not YA?
I think just there's a lot of nuance in the theming. For me, just the theming of like choice and trust and like, especially in the first book, the theming of like religion and desire and stuff like that. It's just, I feel like it's not like so nuanced that, oh, you have to read between the lines. It is there. Like it's the in between. It's not like, surface level, like right in front of your face, but it's also not like it's not like Malazan where you gotta dig into it to figure out compassion. So
I never got that far, so I don't know that I'll ever be able to read Malazan and be like, oh, it's about compassion. Like that's just not where my brain goes.
The compassion stuff that people talk about doesn't really start
I just want to read it for the
noticeably
characters
until like the fourth book anyway.
Yeah,
that's all I hear about Malazan is it's about compassion. So I'm just
it's about and that's
but you
that's
have to
what
read the whole
too.
thing to get that, really.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
Like
it's about so many themes too.
the big compassion thing doesn't even really become apparent until the last couple of books, but it's also about so many themes.
right. It's hard. You can't possibly pull a series
not
that
about
vast to one thing.
Yeah. No, it is not. It like anyone who says it's only about compassion has missed the point.
Yeah.
That's
it's
like
about
saying Realm of the
lots
Elder Lanes is only about identity.
Yeah.
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 No,
there's
so
a
much more than
lot going on.
This is why it's hard to elevator pitch books. Like I completely just bombed my elevator pitch for Bloodstones on Chatting with Nuts last night because I'm like, how do I like pull this
you
whole
also
thing?
don't even have it finished. So
I did try to kind of make that point. It's like, well, it's not done yet, but there's like, characters in it and stuff and a war and stuff and like I'm not there yet. I don't have an elevator pitch yet.
It's hard when you haven't finished a book. That's understandable.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
especially something in fantasy where it's just there's so much to encompass in like a tiny little 3-sentence elevator pitch. It's
Yeah.
awful. Hate it.
That's really hard. I think that's understandable. I get that way with molasses, and I can say it right. I get that with that
Now you're gonna be so
too.
self-conscious, Joanna.
I am, because a lot of
Jerome is right. It's about dinosaurs with swords for arms.
perfect pitch.
That's
Perfect
the
pitch.
point of
That's the
Malazan.
whole point.
Yeah.
That's the
Sure,
whole
I
point.
buy that.
Yeah. Yeah. But also, like, whenever people call it grimdark, and that's a whole other conversation. It's like, what is YA? What is grimdark? All these words that were like, what the heck do they mean? But when people say that, I could see how people see that when you're early on in the series. But then when you get to where it lands, that's where I'm like, this isn't grimdark.
It's a world which is grim and it's dark sometimes, and that's not the point.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfectly said. I like that.
It is
Yeah.
grimdark, but it's not about being grimdark.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that kind of surprised me, and I realized that
It's about
First
really
Law
cool magic battles.
is about like one of the predecessors of a lot of the what we consider grimdark now. But I was expecting it to be darker than it was.
Oh, really?
And maybe that's just me. I
Wow.
don't know what that says
Yeah.
about me as a reader, but
You're
yeah, and I know I'd heard
expecting
that.
Malazan to be darker than
No,
it
no,
is?
no.
I know.
First Law. First Law.
Oh, First
Oh,
Law.
First
Law,
Law.
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Malazan's plenty dark.
That's pretty common.
Malazan's
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
than dark enough. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Malazan is yes.
Yeah, that's kind of the slightly ironic thing, is that I guess I can see how First Law is considered grimdark in a way if we go by certain definitions, I suppose.
Mhm.
However, there's darker content in Malazan,
Oh, yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
it's not considered,
Much.
and it's not grimdark.
You know what's funny about that? So I'm working on a video essay about clean fantasy, which is a polarizing term that I've found. And it's like anything else, all these different genres and categories and labels in fantasy, and every single person has a different, like, explanation, definition, level, boundary, etc. And I asked people on Twitter in March, like, what kind of series do you think of? And I got everything from, the typical, Tolkien, Chronicles of Narnia, all the way up to someone legitimately mentioned Malazan as a clean fantasy option. And I was like, I don't know what, like, even if everyone has different standards of what that means, how do we get there with Malazan? I'm missing.
I mean, the
that
only
one.
way I could describe Malazan as clean is there's almost no sex in it.
Yeah. I mean,
There's sex in Malazan.
there's a point.
Yeah, but there's almost no. I mean, like, in
Right. It's
10
very
books,
minimal.
There's extremely little sex, and there's certainly nothing graphically sexual.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
You know,
implied,
like,
very graphically implied, but
Yeah, sex happens, but it's there's very little.
I have
Like-
never heard of this term before, Tori.
really?
it
Sando?
I've never heard of it.
Sando.
Is it
Yeah,
Oh.
Sando is the cleanest
Generally,
fantasy I
kind of
know
the
of.
three benchmarks are little to no sexual content, or if there is any, it is very much like fade to black off screen. Violence is like the least concerning of the three options for a lot of people, as long as it's not in like super gruesome detail. So like Tolkien, there's battles and wars and all sorts of things, but it's not there's no
heads
guts
coming
hanging
off
out.
and
Exactly.
blood's fountains and-
So it's more like the level of detail you're getting in that, and then basically crude language is the other benchmark. So of those three things,
Wow.
some people try to avoid books that have higher levels of those content
That would
pieces.
take out Way of Edan.
Right, and then that's just it. So I'm
That would
compiling
take
a
out
list.
most of my fantasy, my favorite fantasy.
Same. Well, and that's where I'm trying to compile a list. And I'm talking to a whole bunch of people that I know that are widely read in fantasy and saying, okay, like, let's try to come up with a list for people that are looking for, because I think every point on the spectrum for this is important. For people that are less comfortable with those things, what do we offer them besides Tolkien and Sanderson and Chronicles of Narnia? Like, there's more out there. So let's actually give some.
Dune. I think the Dune series might fall under that criteria.
There's no swearing. There's no
There's
sex.
There is
mean,
sex, but it's very fade to black.
yeah, there's
Yeah,
like very light suggestion that sex happened.
Brian.
I'm sorry. Brian's comment is
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
like
Yes.
I'm
Yeah,
almost
Brian-
afraid to ever let my characters breathe in my books now because I know everybody's gonna be like,
I found it in the Mercedes Lackey trilogy from the 80s. There was the line,
everywhere.
yeah, he let out a breath. He didn't know he was holding.
Yep.
Like,
The characters are totally allowed to breathe. They're just not allowed to be unaware that they're breathing.
they're not allowed to be aware of that they're
Right.
breathing.
Unaware if they're breathing, like being aware of your breathing, but like not knowing that you were. Yeah, that's the part that's horrible.
I think
Um,
June falls into that. I think
June is
relatively-
clean.
I think it's pretty clean.
PG-13 fantasy is something that I've heard from a lot of people too.
June
that
is
they,
June is definitely pretty clean. I mean,
Yeah.
you can argue about whether it's fantasy or science fiction.
well, I'm including some
Um,
like sci-fi. I'm just doing kind of SFF, mostly fantasy, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I actually
Princess Bride.
have argued numerous times that
Yeah.
June is actually fantasy, but
I think it's sci
um,
fantasy. Yeah.
Yeah, or sci fantasy or
Mhm.
whatever. Which
Labels.
like calling it
Yeah.
sci fantasy is proving how useless labels are.
Right.
Basically.
Well, I call Red Rising, like I got, several people yelled at me for including Red Rising in my favorite like fantasy list. And to me, fantasy is kind of like the overarching umbrella, and sci-fi is like sort of its own little part of that. Which I
Yeah.
know the sci-fi people would be like, "Ugh," but
Yeah. Yeah. I
So-
wouldn't
Speculative.
really
There you
agree.
go.
sure.
I think the lines are
Speculative.
way too blurred, honestly. Like I
Yeah.
think it's
And Red Rising is very sci-fantasy. Like it's definitely a blend of both.
I
for
would
sure.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like as soon as you get people doing things with their minds which are not explainable by science, then Dune is not just science fiction.
Hmm.
You know, and Dune, like there's almost nothing in Dune that is actually about technology.
Yeah.
The all of the things that lean towards science are not explainable by science.
I think it's because it's like environmental geographical connections to the magic.
Hi, Jimmy.
Well,
Hey, Jimmy.
yeah, not like the Bene Gesserit magic is not
I mean,
geographical at all.
If I am going to be that person, technically they have evolved so much that they have these powers. So
Yeah, but explain it by science.
no, I know. I just
You know,
But there's also
Be that
soft sci-fi versus hard sci-fi.
hello
I-
nuts.
I honestly don't like
I
it
just
when
read
people-
books. I don't know. I get
Yeah, I don't know. The distinctions are kind of silly
Yeah.
after a while.
I just
Yeah.
tell people
Oh.
I tend to lean toward reading dark fantasy. Like that's the best. It's kind of an overarching that's my reading taste typically.
I've certainly
Yeah.
gotten that label over the last year.
Mhm.
Reading Baker and
I was gonna say you read darker than I do usually. I don't know if
I mean-
I'm gonna be able to do Baker. I don't know.
even
We'll see.
even like you normally, like my first reaction would not be to describe Realm of the Elderlings as dark, but fuck, it's dark. Like when I really think about it,
It's
I'm like,
emotionally dark.
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
stuff even the world, like the
Yeah.
stuff going on in the world even
Yeah.
is pretty dark. It's not a world necessarily that you look at as a observer, like as a reader, and think,
I want to go there.
well, no, I mean, I was thinking the opposite. You don't like. I would never kind of describe it as grim dark
Mhm.
or anything like that. But it's a lot of the stuff going on there. You're like, yeah, this is not a world I would want to live in because I'd probably be screwed, pretty quickly. I'd get forged, and that'd be it.
Mhm.
So is it
It's
Jimmy's
true.
fault?
It is. It's Jimmy's fault, and he's
Yeah.
gotten me into McCarthy too, which is pretty dark. So
Yeah, no, I've heard that. I haven't read
Bad
any McCarthy
influence,
yet,
friend.
but yeah, bad influence, nuts.
Jimmy was telling me to try the first Baker and just see. I don't know. That's going to be a hard sell for me. So I'm waffling.
I actually
It's-
would be very curious to hear your thoughts.
It's super on my list. Like once I finish my Malazan reread, I definitely want to get to Baker.
I
Mhm.
think it's brilliant.
Um,
I honestly think it's brilliant. But
Although I'm also going to try Tad Williams because of Jimmy. So
I'm so tempted to jump into that read along that's starting this
Patrick
next
and
month.
Alex.
Yeah, I really want to join, but I don't think
Yeah,
I'm
they're
having
starting.
enough time. But I really
You're-
want to join.
You're paraphrasing Arthur C. Clarke, Abigail. Arthur C. Clarke said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So yeah, basically,
So
Science
basically,
wouldn't
so are
understand.
you trying to say that Brandon Sanderson making his magic scientific is still magic? Like hard magic, I mean?
Yeah, I'm just not personally a big fan of hard magic. I'm always like, you know, if you explain the magic to me in detail, it kind of loses its
Wonder.
magic.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
I don't want to know the rules. I
Rhythm
want
of
it to
War
be
was a
mysterious.
experience.
Yeah. Yeah, and also Mistborn. I mean, it's a cool
Yeah.
idea, like with the medals and everything. It's totally a cool idea, but I'm kind of like, yeah, okay.
Mistborn I could
Doesn't
handle.
feel very magic.
Like once we got to Rhythm of War and there were like 500 pages of him describing his magic system, I was like, I'm so bored. I can't even handle it right now.
Yeah.
When you interrupt a siege for a character not to be concerned about people dying around them, but like, oh, this is how fabrials work. Blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah.
right? It's like,
Yeah.
take me back to the siege, please. That's more
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Nuts wants to have a meal at Buckkeep so he can kick Regal in the balls. Yep.
Valid.
Regal is possibly number one on my list of characters I would like to punch in the throat. Yeah.
Wait, you never read the last two series, right?
I didn't read the last trilogy.
Okay.
Oh,
Hest. I hate Hest more than everybody in the
Okay. I mean, I'm because it's recency bias. I really want to punch Kyle in the throat right now. Like I'm super keen.
Like everyone was preparing me for how bad Regal was, how bad Kyle was. No one prepared me for Hest.
I'm trying to remember. See, I not only have I not read the last trilogy, but I have a horrible memory. And the whole Dragons series, I remember very, very vaguely. I know that I
was the husband of the character, the Elise who went up the river.
Yeah, I do remember it, but it's really vague. It's really vague. I'll get to rereading it. Fighting existential dread and personal hatred. Sounds like you're having a great day, Nuts. Do you need a
hoping
the
weekend
hug?
goes a little better than last week for Jimmy. Had kind of a rough week, it sounded like last night.
Jerome is getting too drunk for this. Yeah, I think when we start the next sprint, I'm actually going to go get some scotch.
Nice.
It's only 2:30 in the afternoon, Matt.
It's 20 to 10 in the evening here, so I think it is scotch time.
3:37 here.
My dad, who was
5 o'clock somewhere, so
exactly my dad, who was a sailor, said it's too early to drink until the sun is over the yardarm, which basically means as long as it's after, like, you can read it as higher than the yardarm, in which case like 9 o'clock in the morning is fine. And over the yardarm is relative to which direction you're sailing in, if it has to have gone over it. So basically he was saying anytime, you know.
Thank you, Jimmy. Hest is definitely a turd. Thank you.
Hest is definitely a turd. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, Hobb does such an amazing job at making me understand characters, sometimes even when I don't want to. Like Kenneth, I sympathize a lot with Kenneth.
Yep.
I don't sympathize a whole lot with Kyle. I just want to punch him.
Mhm.
But She is so good at characters that you care about the characters who aren't just straight up evil, and you really want to kill the evil ones, like
Yeah.
Regal and Hest and
Hmm.
Kyle. Oh my god. So it's almost 22. Do we want to start another splint? Did you want to say something, Joanna?
Oh yeah, I was just going to respond to the Umbridge comment that Brian
100%.
said. Andy Smith did a fantastic video a couple of years ago about that, about why Umbridge is the more aggravating villain than Voldemort. Such a fantastic video. I highly recommend.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I mean the thing with Voldemort, at least he's just straight up honest about
Mm-hmm.
what he is.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's just personified evil.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there isn't a whole lot more. And Umbridge is like veiled and lying evil.
Well, and I think too, like, I don't know how familiar you guys are with Doctor Who, but Stephen Moffat, who writes a lot of the like darkest, most memorable episodes of Doctor Who, talked about like how you take something that is supposed to be innocent for really good horror and you completely twist it. And I think Umbridge as this like loving, like supposed to be protective, nurturing authority figure, and you just completely flip that on its head.
That makes me think of the Stone Angels.
Yep, he wrote that one. Yep.
Oh my
and
god!
also
Do you guys know the Stone Angels in Doctor Who?
I know of it, but no.
They're basically
never thought of
creatures
that
that can
before.
only move if they're not being looked at,
Mhm.
and they look like angel statues. And every time you blink, like they want to kill you, and every time you blink, they move towards you.
Not exactly.
Sort of. Yeah. I don't remember. It's been a long time. Like I said, I
It's
have a
funny
crap
because
memory.
what they actually do to you is not like as nefarious as it originally sounds, but it's just the principle of the whole theme of the episode is don't blink, right? Because as soon as you close your eyes and open them again, the angels can move. And it's
Weeping
absolutely
angels.
terrifying. It's absolutely
Yeah.
terrifying.
Sounds like a cool, creepy concept.
It's excellent.
It's so creepy and scary. Like it's the scariest. Normally, Doctor Who is not very scary,
Mhm.
and that is a full-on creepy episode.
We watched it in my intro to fiction class in my freshman year of college, and our teacher, bless him, absolutely loved him. Shout out Dr. Hannah, he's amazing. But he turned the lights off on us when the episode was over, and there was a girl behind me who just flat out screamed. And he turns the lights back on, he's chuckling, you know, and she's like, "I'm not okay right now." And like it was pretty intense.
That's
Yeah.
cool. That sounds
Yeah, it was
cool.
very cool.
I grew up on the original Doctor Who. Like when I was a
Mm.
kid, I was watching Tom Baker was my favorite Doctor,
Mhm.
and it was almost never really scary. There were weird things to think about and stuff like that, but there was never anything in it that was
Then
really
Stephen
scary.
Moffat happened.
And then Stephen Moffat happened,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Because he did
it's-
the gas mask
the new
kids
one's been
one too.
scarier. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, I don't really want to re-speak Andy's video, but he did, speaking to Jimmy's comment, it did feel kind of like a political theme, the way the angle he took, because Voldemort is more the pervasive, insidious evil that we can't really, it's more intangible, that's more that we can't really see. And Umbridge is there in our environment constantly.
That makes sense.
That we're constantly having to engage with. And
Yeah.
so I don't know. I thought it was a really
Umbridge is one
interesting-
of us who is evil, and Voldemort is alien evil.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which is not as scary.
yeah. I mean, you can't relate to it as much. It's like
Right.
he's got a snake face, and he's like whatever, you know.
But he's still the bigger evil at the same time. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
At the same time, I also don't, it's an interesting video because when I think back on my experience of Harry Potter, and that was years ago, I do remember feeling like, I don't know, engaging with Voldemort face to face. And maybe my brain is altered from the movies. He still didn't seem as annoying as Umbridge somehow. But
I'd agree with that.
So let's have a splint until 1:15. Let's say. I will put up the banner and enjoy your reading, everyone. See you after the sprint. Hello.
It was probably a good thing I was on mute this last sprint because I laughed out loud so many times during this. Oh, Abercrombie.
The dark humor is excellent.
Yes. He knows how to end a chapter too. Like the way he like punctuates the endings of chapters or the endings of sections is just like perfect.
My best friend is currently reading the final book of the Red Rising trilogy, and I'm getting angry text messages. So, in a good way.
I still haven't read that one. Is that the Dark Age?
No, so this is the first trilogy. Morning Star is the third.
Oh yeah.
It's like a closed circuit, and then Pierce Brown decided, you know what, I'm going to write what happens like 10, 20 years later.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, she's reading the final book in the original trilogy.
Yeah. I like that one the best out of the original trilogy.
Yeah. Love Morning Star.
Yeah.
I have not read any of those, but I want to. I keep hearing from people they're good.
Of all the writers I can think of, I feel like Pierce Brown, for me, shows the biggest progression in his writing style from book to book.
Okay.
Of any writer I've seen.
Yeah. Morning Star is still my favorite ending to a trilogy of all time.
Yeah.
I love it.
Okay.
I think like when I read Golden Sun, I feel kind of bad about it because I think that's a lot of people's favorite. But my timing when I read that was just bad. I read that I think at the wrong time because I read that like right after I read The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien, and
those are not anywhere near the same style of book.
Opposite sides of the spectrum when it comes to pacing. So my mind was like on Middle Earth vibes and pacing and style, and then to go into like this super fast space opera, it was jarring. It was
I have to be really careful about what books I read in what order because sometimes if I'm like really in a mood for fast-paced action like Red Rising, and then I go to something like Realm of the Elderlings, I'm going to be more frustrated with it because my brain is kind of still in that faster-paced mode. So I have to kind of be careful about what order I read things in.
Well, there has to be a science to that because I know I read a research article one time about programming when it comes to albums and music and how they program like certain fast songs and alternate with certain slower songs. But there's a real science to how they create that progression or that arc or that contrast. You know, it's not just fast, slow, fast, So why wouldn't it be the same with how we read, especially for the type of people we are, where we read books, one right after another without pause.
I finished mine, by the way.
Hey.
Officially.
How was it?
What you were just describing is why I always leave at least a day between books. Like I just want that one to settle a bit and
depends on the book for me. Malazan, I still have never immersed as far as I did ever with Malazan with anything else. And so I'm almost like coming out of a trance when I come out of Malazan books. So typically it takes a lot to get me to immerse that far. So usually I'm okay as long as I'm not making like a massive tone shift.
After reading or rereading, I think it was House of Chains, last year, I didn't read anything else for almost a week. I was just like,
House of Chains is a big one.
I'm a little blown away and slightly traumatized, and I'm just going to chill and let that sink in for a little while. And it took 4 or 5 days off.
It's a powerful one for sure. Well, they're all powerful. I don't know what I'm saying, but it's interesting. So I think what I tend to do, Matt, is I still read every day because I feel like I just have to. I don't know. It's like this. There's a whole story behind that. I'm a very cute cat, by the way.
He was sleeping. This is Pippin.
Okay.
Pippin is cute.
He was sleeping, so he's not very happy with me right now. But
Why did you pick me up?
I was like, Mom, I'm trying to sleep.
But I almost always give myself permission to read a lot less the day following finishing a book. And it usually tends to be the case. I don't know how it is for you all, but it usually tends to be the case with a lot of books where when I get close to the end, usually that's when I end up reading in bigger chunks.
Yep.
So then my brain does need a little bit of space after that too.
I just finished like 20-30% of this today. So the last
Nice.
it was, I mean, it reads really quickly, so that helps. But yeah, it was, the ending even got me a little, there's a couple moments where I got a little emotional. So I was impressed. It's like, good job.
Ooh.
So
Always nice.
yeah.
I think in the 3 sprints we had, I was reading slower and slower because like there are just some shifts in this book where it takes you a little while to get back on your feet and kind of like reoriented. And it's worth taking a little time and rereading a couple of bits and, you know, figuring out
the
where
book
it's
is
at.
more complex or dense, then I slow down a lot.
Yeah.
Like when I go
it doesn't
back to,
feel dense, but there are these the chapters are really big, and each chapter kind of has a setup phase where things shift a bit from the previous chapter, and it takes a little while to get reoriented and figure out, okay, what's this chapter going to be doing, and then it starts flowing kind of normally again, and it's really good, but it's just a very different book.
That was something I was admiring about Martin when I was rereading A Storm of Swords. Is he jumps POV every chapter, but I felt like it took no time at all for me to be immersed in the next perspective on a different part of the world. I don't know. I think that's hard to achieve though, but this still sounds really interesting.
It's really good, and it's not so much character shifts or anything like that. It's it's hard to explain much of it without explaining stuff I probably shouldn't be explaining if you haven't read it. But there's kind of a framing device that shifts and changes throughout the book, and it's sort of each chapter gets reframed a little bit at the beginning of the chapter. And then you're like, oh, okay, so this has changed, and okay, and then that continues.
Yeah.
So
Is that how you describe it, Evie?
Describe what book?
Spirit Cuts Through Water.
Oh, yes. Thought you were still talking about Game of
your
Thrones.
favorite book. You know that book that you talk about all the time, and you
I thought
say
you were
to
still talking
everyone?
about Game of Thrones. I'm sorry. So while you were talking about Joanna, were you talking about kind of connecting to characters or like really quickly? I actually was thinking about The Vanished Birds more. Because it's basically you're following a different perspective in each very long chapter. It's true, Jimmy. Fake fan. Also, I decided Matt wasn't going to drink alone, and apparently my alcohol tolerance is in the negative. So, sorry guys. But yeah, no. So
I'm still drinking water, actually. So
it.
sorry.
Listen, you said you were going.
I'll be right back. I'll be right back. I'll go get myself a scotch. You
no one should drink alone, okay?
I mean, there's a tiny amount of alcohol in kombucha. I don't know if that really counts.
I had kombucha for the first time like many years ago. I got it at work. They sold it at work. And I'm like, why do I feel buzzed right now? Like, what the heck is happening? So
you really must have like no tolerance.
There's not much in there.
Listen, it's been many a year since my college days. So
Goodness.
But yeah, because you guys I thought Matt was still talking about Game of Thrones, I kind of zoned out. So I
have a 12-year Craggamore, so
nice.
You're not drinking alone.
No, Matt was talking about the really interesting framing device in each chapter in The Spirit That Cuts Through Water and how it causes him to have to slow down his reading pace a bit when he starts a new chapter.
The chapters are also interesting in that the whole book, it's not really a quest story, but it's a travel story.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of like The Vanished Bird.
Yeah, maybe. And each chapter is a day. And the chapters are called day 1, day 2, day 3. So it's like every day there's sort of not really a restart, but there is a framing thing going on that I find it really hard to talk about without spoiling anything. But yeah.
Well, I would, at least for me, this is just obviously my experience, but I feel like with the way that Simon Jimenez sets up the story and the narrative structure at the very beginning, the shifts between the days and the chapters, whatever you want to call them, it feels very, what's the word I'm thinking of?
Cheers, Dan.
Feels what?
I said cheers, Dan.
Dan's drinking with you all.
Nice.
What about the bounce zone, Dan?
Poland Springs is a water brand.
Yeah, it is.
So-
He's drinking a bottle of water.
Okay.
Oh,
I was gonna say.
It is not a scotch or anything interesting.
But yeah, so I don't know. I feel like for me, because he sets up this narrative structure at the very beginning and he kind of sets the expectation, the transition between the chapters and with the narrative, like it's just, he kind of flows it from the end of the previous chapter to the next one, and kind of, it's not like a jarring shift in any way. If that makes sense.
No, it's just at the beginning of each chapter. I mean, you can say this because it's set up very early in the book. First of all, it's a very, very nested narrative, right? Mm-hmm. It's extremely nested. There are so many stories inside stories, and the general thing is that it also switches between first, second, and third person all the time. So the second person story, you are somebody who is having a dream. And most of the story takes place inside that dream. And inside that dream, someone tells a story. And then inside that story that's being told, sometimes someone tells a story. And sometimes it jumps back out of the dream into your second person sort of not dream world, which is either happening or is a memory. Sometimes one, sometimes the other. And it's really, really interesting, the structure. Yeah, this is the main part, I would say, is like nothing that I have read before or anytime recently anyway, is just that the structure is crazy and he manages it masterfully. I feel like he's juggling lots of really sharp knives, and so far he hasn't cut himself. You know, he's doing it really, really well.
Yeah, he in his like author's like thank you thing when it was that his publisher sent out when it was published, he said that it took him 4 years of basically constant writing to write The Spirit Cuts Through Water. He's like, I don't want to write that long again. Hopefully the next one will not take this long. So
I mean, there's the other thing I was just thinking, like literally just in the last sprint as I was reading it, there are sentences in there which feel like he went over them 6 times. You know, like there are a couple of sentences in there where you read it and you're like, whoa, that was a very cool sentence. And
like the one you sent me?
Like the one I sent you earlier. And I assume that those don't just flow off of an author's conscious brain like that, you know? I'm assuming he probably wrote something and then polished it and adjusted it and changed it, and, you know. And a lot of the text feels like that it's really been worked on until it's the right words in the right order. It's good. It's good. Dang. I will definitely be putting up a review for it eventually.
That's exciting. I need to get on that book.
And I need to get offline. It is 10:30 here.
Oh, okay.
It's a bit later than where it is for most of you. It has been a pleasure. I'm so glad that so many of you and Dan earlier joined.
Yeah.
It's nice to actually have voices to talk to and not just reply to people writing asynchronously in the chat.
Well, it's nice to have voices other than the ones in my own head to talk to.
Same.
Yeah. Always got those. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Constant
thank you so
companions.
much for
Yeah, thanks for having us, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a pleasure. I hope everybody who is in the Beanie Barbarians team, I don't care about the other teams, but I hope that everybody in Beanie Barbarians gets their 5th book done.
Yeah, and I was actually just going to do a shameless plug. Not that I'm even in the readathon, but at 6 is the final
Hour and a half.
point.
Well,
Right.
so we have our scoreboard at 6 Eastern, which is about an hour and a half, and that will be this week's scoreboard. And then we have a final 24 hours on the last day of April, where people can turn in their final submissions, and we will be defending our lead, I'm assuming. So, but we got like 4 or 5 submissions while I was in the last sprint. So you guys are rocking it.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
I will definitely get Spear Cuts Through Water finished tomorrow, and
Nice.
that will give me my full 15 points.
Is that your chonker or no?
No, I think I use the prompt. I've been hoarding it because
Since Christmas.
I mean, yes, I mean not
That counts.
for years, but
That counts.
I've had it there, and I'm just like, I really want to read that, and
Yep.
and I'm finally getting to it. So
Yep.
These are funny prompt names.
They're great. Everything was like, what are the things that people always talk about that's sitting on there? So we had like second book in a series. It was recommended by a friend, intimidating chonkers over 500 pages, like, all the things that people leave on their stacks for.
yeah, I couldn't justify using the chunker prompt because for me, chunkers start at 800 pages. Like with
we were trying to cover a wide range of
Malazan.
readers.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
luckily,
yeah.
there are so many prompts. Like it's pretty
Yeah.
easy to find 5 books that you can get 3 points on.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, after Malazan is, and also Realm of the Elderlings, it's changed my perception of what a big book is.
Yes.
I've been stalled on Reaper's Gale for a couple of months now because it's over 1,200 pages.
Which is funny because in the trade paperback, it's smaller than Memories of Ice.
Huh.
Like it doesn't look that.
Just looking at my shelf. No, Reaper's Gale is definitely in the mass market. It's thicker.
Isn't that weird?
Oh, that is weird.
That
I'm
is
not
weird.
sure. I don't know why. I don't know if because the font is the same size.
Let me check quickly.
That is
My
interesting.
shelf is right over there. Let me check.
So I wonder what the page count, or not page count,
Word count.
word count is. Yeah.
I'm sure Google would.
Yeah. I know Toll the Hounds has the biggest word count in the entire series. It's like ridiculous how long that is. But yeah, word count is the way to go.
Word count. Oh, here's a Wikipedia page. Memories is 358,000 words. Reaper's Gale.
Memories of Ice, you said, right?
Yep, Memories is 358,000. Reaper's Gale is 386,000. Toll the Hounds is 392. But like the shortest book is 209,000, and that's
it's
Gardens of
almost
the
a
Moon.
third or even a half thicker in mass market.
Huh.
Well, it's weird too because it's showing the page counts of like Toll the Hounds is 832 pages, but The Crippled God is 928, but it's shorter.
Yeah. Word count wise, it's shorter.
I'm confused.
Yeah.
Memories of Ice, in the edition I have, is 980 pages, and Reaper's Gale is 1,280 pages.
Nice.
So it is like a third longer. But
Yeah, I don't know why the trade paperback is so chunky for Memories of Ice.
yeah, I don't understand it either. Maybe they changed font size or something. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
Got nothing.
Well, I have to get going too, y'all.
Yeah, it
so
looks basically the
thank
same.
It's nice to see you again,
Hello.
Johanna.
Nice
It's
to
been a
see
while.
you.
I'm glad you could finally make it.
Thank you.
I'm
so
glad that we were able to have our little fight, Joanna.
Yay! Anytime. No, I loved all your points though, because I feel like they apply to the Mercedes Lackey trilogy too. Exactly. I mean, there's
I'll
magical
be
trope, everything. So
I'll be super happy to host another girl fight anytime you guys.
I think we should
Wanna-
continue it sometime because it's a really interesting.
It's like
conversation.
our classics cage match, which are surprisingly civil.
Yay.
no
Well, thank
cage,
you
no
all.
match.
No.
Have a good evening. Thanks
Bye,
again, Matt.
guys.
Bye, guys.
See you all later. Thanks everyone in the chat.